I'm going to be talking about Karl Popper and the Austrian School of Economics. As most of you probably know, both Karl Popper was a very close associate of Hayek, and they were close associates and friends for most of their open times. In fact, Karl Popper said that The Road to Serfdom could have been the third volume of this two-volume Open Society and Its Enemies. Now, my focus is rather on Mises rather than Hayek, because I believe Hayek and, to a certain extent, Menger represent kind of a middle ground between Popper and Mises, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Now, the fatal split is actually a phrase that comes from a letter that Popper wrote to Hayek, where he broached the subject of interventionism and hoped that they could come together on that. He said that if they could, then there is a hope of getting over the fatal split in the humanitarian camp and uniting the vast majority of liberals and socialists. To work for this union is today the main task of us all, without exaggeration. Now, the split basically became a split more or less with the establishment of Hayek's Montpellieran Society in 1947. Popper, for reasons already suggested, wanted to include or suggested including some anti-totalitarian socialists like, for example, among others, George Orwell and Bertrand Russell. Now, there were members of the Chicago School there as well, and Mises famously ran out of a discussion amongst them saying that you're all a bunch of socialists. So you could say, in essence, that these two lions of liberty had different attitudes about how to preserve that liberty. As Cohen wrote in his famous 2000, written in 2000, his study of Popper, he said that Mises and Hayek's libertarianism was unprecedented. They did not continue a liberal anti-socialist tradition, they created it. So since that time, it's been more or less institutionalized. Now, two key points I want to make is one is scientific, that is to say, it has to do with the methodology of the social sciences, and the second is programmatic, and it has to do with the problem situation that liberal democracy finds itself in. And my basic thesis is that the polarization that we're now witnessing has its roots in there, and much of the discussion is about interventionism and the role of the state in society. Now, first is science. Francisco de Arroyo has written on Mises and Popper, and there are many areas where both ideologically and methodologically they are similar. But there are three specific areas he pointed out where they differ. The first is the relationship between the theory and experience. The next one is the nature of the rationality principle, and also the foundations of methodological individualism. So I'll go over all these as quick as I can. I want to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. So theory and experience is basically about the theory and their relationship to the real world. Ever since Hume, there's been the issue of what Popper called the two fundamental problems of the theory of knowledge, namely the twin problems of induction and demarcation. And Popper and Mises came to very different solutions to this problem. Mises' solution was praxeology and a priorism, and for Popper it was critical rationalism and fallibilism. Now, there's a book coming out from Mark Notturno where he compares Popper to Frege, who's the father of modern logic, and he talks about essentially a paradigm shift in the 20th century between an EP1 and an EP2 kind of epistemology. You could look at EP1 as sort of the quest for certainty, and EP2 as the fallibilism, or basically the recognition that even our best theories are only provisionally true. EP1 is sort of based on logic, or kind of a Platonic or Aristotelian essentialism, and it's the search for an apodictic certainty or proven true knowledge. Mises' a priorism is, in a sense, a kind of an attempt at that apodictic certainty through rational inference, starting from the foundational self-evident axiom man acts, and then working from there. Now, Popper and Einstein embraced the EP2 paradigm. Einstein famously drew a kind of a parallel here, or a contrast between mathematics and the real world. This is related in a sense to the analytic-synthetic dichotomy, analytic being things that are true by definition, and those that are true because of observation. So it's kind of a way of trying to get over the split between rationalism and empiricism. So basically, Mises follows on the top fork, and Popper does as well, but only in the form of his formation of theories. But the theories that are formed by that way, it's a way of getting around induction, have to then be tested afterwards in order to be either falsified or verified, or corroborated, it's better to say. So how is it, and this is the main question, how can the social sciences, including economics, be made more objective and more scientific? Popper's approach is to try to see a commonality between the natural sciences and the social sciences. Mises, on the other hand, rejected this entirely. He said that the unified science is a chimera, or an illusion. But Popper's point is that those who see it this way, this strict distinction between the two, do so because they misunderstand the nature of the natural sciences. Popper insists that natural sciences are not inductive, as Mises thought, and the natural world is not characterized by radical determinism. And so therefore the social world is also in the same way. And models can be used in both of them. So critical rationalism allows for a closer unity of method between the natural and the social sciences, which makes them more objective and effective. The truth claims of praxeology are somewhat problematic, I would say, and I would argue the various attempts that have been made to reconcile a priorism and fallibilism cannot be successful for various reasons that we might get into in the question and answer. Now, for further clarification, there's a well-known debate that took place between David Friedman and Bob Murray, who's a kind of a very Misesian member of the Austrian School of Economics. Friedman is a physicist and an economist, and he makes many of the same points in that debate that I think Popper would make if he were here to make them. So, on to the nature of the rationality principle. Popper maintains an objective rationality principle, whereas he says that Mises' rationality principle is subjective. Now, what did he mean by this? Popper's approach is to look at rationality from the point of view of situational logic. And within that situational logic, there are three senses of rationality for Popper. One is the situation as it always was, as it actually is, or the situation as the agent sees it or saw it, and the third is the situation as the agent could have or perhaps should have seen it. Mises' notion is the identity of action and rationality, which is basically only focusing on number two. His point is that rationality is only about how the agent actually saw it. Critical rationalism, therefore, provides a better basis for methodological individualism. Popper's rationality reveals the problem situation from a more institutional level, that is to say, in terms of the constraints out of which the logic of the situation is formed. Thus, it allows for an analysis of irrationalism, of failure, and of institutional dysfunction, the entropy, in other words, that we heard about. D'Arroyo points out that it allows us to distinguish between science and ideology in history. Thus, it is more appropriate for the social sciences, including economics, and for what Menger called the real purpose of the social sciences, that is to investigate the unintended consequences of intended action. And these consequences, of course, also emerge from the aggregate interactions of individuals under institutional constraints. So, conclusion. I'd like to turn to the programmatic aspects, and I'm focused here primarily but not exclusively on the United States. First, because it is the world's leading democracy, both economically and strategically. Second, because it is the country from which many trends, both positive and negative, arise. And third, because it is the country where the Misesian or libertarian approach is strongest, at least ideologically and within the population. So, Now, the truth or falsity of theories is important because economic policy affects the lives of millions of people. And if our theories are merely immunized rational constructs, they won't be successful. At present, the enemies of the open society and of democracy are gathering strength both outside and inside of the countries that are still democratic. The United States is plagued by a tremendous level of political polarization and fanaticism. And a lot of this has its roots in the question of interventionism and the role of the state. Popper warned about this in a letter to Rudolf Carnap, where he said that the philosophies of socialism and liberalism are both, we inherited from the 19th century, are both a little too simple and a little too naive. I fully share the conviction of the liberals that freedom is the most important thing in the political field, but I'm convinced that freedom cannot be saved without improving distributive justice, i.e., without increasing economic equality. What about the polarization? This is sort of a graphic of the polarization of political opinion in the United States in 1994, and this is what it looks like in 2017. It's only getting worse. Popper warned Hayek about the effects of inequality on collectivism. And this is the kind of collectivist activity we see. So, if I go back here, Marx, I believe, was right in saying that laissez-faire destroys itself by way of class struggle. This is why an explicit recognition of the need for some intervention is not only necessary in the interest of clarity, but also in the interest of that union in the camp of freedom, which is necessary if collectivism is to be avoided. And here we have the kind of collectivism, both of the left, extreme left, and extreme right. So why is this? If we look back about 40 years, we have something of a revolution that took place in economic theory. And the basic situation there is we've got certain elements of it. Privatization, tax cuts, deregulation, and changes in the legal framework that tend to favor business, for example. Now, here's a map of, or a graph of the kind of increase in inequality that took place. After that, if you see 1970 up to here, this is inequality of incomes. Now you notice the years here, of course, you got 1928, what happened after that? The stock market crash, 2007, another stock market crash. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the influence of deregulation and inequality and changes in legal framework on these kinds of speculative bubbles? Since then, I think we'd all agree that the quantitative easing that's been going on has only made the situation worse and exploded the deficit on top of that. There's another American trend that has been exported, most recently to Austria, in fact, that's called corruption. In America, it's taken on really perverse levels. You're allowed to put as much money into politics as you want, and you can do it anonymously. There's also changes in the legal framework that have decimated unions since that time. What has this done to the working class, one must ask? Also, deregulation, we've heard about the media quite a bit. More consolidation of the media through deregulation. This was Clinton. This was not a Republican. So you have fewer and fewer people controlling more and more of the media. And then the death of all the newspapers in 2008, and you eventually have the death of journalism itself. And on top of that, the very ironic situation where postmodern relativism is a two-edged sword. It can be used by both sides. So now we've got essentially very much of a post-fact world. Now, what do ordinary citizens do in the face of all this, corruption and lies and misery, etc.? They do this. You've got irrationalism and extremism both sides. You've got the woke, PC, Maoist red guards of Black Lives Matter on one side, and you've got the QAnon conspiracy theorists, clerofascists attacking the US Capitol on the other side. Popper said in The Open Society that the conflict between rationalism and irrationalism has become the most important intellectual and perhaps even moral issue of our times, and I would argue that it has become so again. Until we can say, look at various theories and talk about this situation from many sides reasonably, and say to ourselves, I may be wrong, you may be right, and by an effort we get closer to truth. If we go this way and dispense with ideology, we may be able to heal the fatal split. Thank you. Is there time for Q&A?
Yeah, we have some time for Q&A.
Okay.
Yes. Please.
Please, yes.
Thanks very much. I'm Steve Baker. I'm a Member of Parliament in the UK. I actually represent the place where Karl Popper lived out the last of his life in Hayes.
Oh, that little house there.
Yeah. So it's very interesting to hear what you have to say, and I'm particularly concerned that this fatal split, isn't it the case that Popper effectively won the argument? We've ended up with a highly interventionist state trying to give redistributive justice, and the problem is we can't afford it. You know, if I look at what's going on in the world right now, huge amounts of quantitative easing, which follow on after enormous amounts of credit expansion. And Greenspan explained to us that that's necessary so that welfare states can run long-term deficits.
Well, Greenspan was also a massive fan of derivatives.
And, yeah. But I'm not praising Greenspan. I'm just trying to make the... I think what I'm asking you is, isn't it the case that actually Popper won this argument? The political economy we have, which is failing, isn't it Karl Popper, as much as I'm a fan of Popper?
It depends what you mean by intervention, yeah? It depends very much what you mean by intervention. If you're talking about quantitative easing is nonsense. I think we can agree on that. And I think on top of it, I think that John Maynard Keynes is rolling over in his grave if people think that this quantitative easing is Keynesianism. It's nonsense. You use debt spending to do a counter-cyclical thing, and then when things improve, you pay back the debt. This exploding deficit is not something that either Popper or Keynes or any intelligent social democrat would ever be in favor of. Yeah? So it depends what you mean by interventionism. Yep, or I don't know.
Yeah. You seem to be very against the notion of any sort of collectivism and
Yes.
pretty much in favor of democracy, but we see that the rhetoric from the left is becoming more and more violent. They're not just saying seize their property, they say kill the capitalists, and it's increasing. And so far what I've seen from you, you're just saying, well, kill them with rhetoric, like explain to them that they're wrong. So I see at some point it becomes necessary to defend our values against the incursions with measures that, like you if you want to win, you sometimes have to do something that you don't really want to do in theory.
I would say to your answer, I don't think we can fight fire with fire. That sounds more like fighting fire with gasoline. In other words, my irrationalism is going to trump your irrationalism. Excuse me, I didn't use the word trump intentionally, but it kind of fits. I think the left is highly irrational. I think critical race theory is insane. We heard a very good presentation about Hegelian dialectic and how this plays into it. They're highly irrational and insane, and the atmosphere in the universities where people can't come in and because mobs try to prevent other people from thinking. I'm just saying there's also enormous irrationalism on the right. I'm saying it's on both sides. Yeah, I'm not condemning only one. Yeah, does that answer your question? Hope a bit. I think more rationalism, more discussion amongst rational people like popperians and Misesians. That's where we should look for the solutions to these things. Yeah.
I think I want to defend the Misesian view a little bit and see if you can come back at me. I think what Karl Popper seems to miss is what Mises pointed out, which is how capitalism has an equalizing effect by serving the consumer. You may say in a dollar value amount, we live in a more unequal society, but I've got a supercomputer in my pocket. The richest feudal lord couldn't enjoy a refrigerator or a vacuum cleaner, or so in material, a rich person can't get a much comfier bed than me. So I think if we'd had less public spending and that money had stayed in the pockets of private individuals to spend in the marketplace, there would have been much more investment in capital and research and things like that. We'd have a much greater standard of living now than we do have, because of the Popperian idea of, no, the market isn't going to lift the poor out of poverty, we need the government to do it. Yeah, tell me if I'm wrong.
That's definitely not Popper at all. And Popper was definitely not against capitalism, neither am I. Whenever I have a student say that they want to stop capitalism, and say, okay, well, I guess you want to become a peasant again. I mean, capitalism has given us everything we have, yeah? So it's not about capitalism or no capitalism. It's about what should be the legal framework and what should be the rules. For example, look at this city. This wonderful place here. It's got one of the highest qualities of life in the world, according to Forbes magazine, and has so had it for the past 9 years. It's been run by socialists for 80 years. So where is the slippery slope to Stalinism that's supposed to be happening here? I'm talking about a mixed economy, not an anti-capitalist economy.
When's the last? 80 years ago. Vienna was producing Wittgenstein. 50 years before that, it was producing all the great Romantic composers. So we have seen the decline. I mean, what
I don't see decline here. Do you live in Vienna?
Compared to what? That is the economist's question.
Well, Forbes magazine says it has one of the highest qualities of life in the world. And about Mises, it's sort of, I'm basically saying that you can use data. I mean, sort of Mises tries to separate economic theory completely from data. And I think through prediction and retrodiction, as I said, I mentioned David Friedman has the same point. Look at here, this is what we call the golden age of capitalism, right? There's a lot of data to test our theories here. We should test our theories and compare them to other theories in order to find solutions, not say, this is our ideology, it must be this way. Okay, maybe it is that way. Let's talk about it. Let's see if it's backed up by experience. Experience is a standard by which theories can be shown to be wrong. And according to Popper, you should try to falsify your theories, not confirm them. Because then they become ideologies. You see what I mean?
I hear what you're saying, yes.
It's not about ending capitalism. Anybody who wants to end capitalism and have the government own everything needs a doctor. Yeah, they need to be taken off in a white suit. That's not about what I'm talking about. It's about a mixed economy.
Okay, thank you very much.
You.
Thank you very much. You deserve an applause. And all the people posing a question.